Dice fans.
It's the Agents of Beastgrave.
And we're back with another tutorial video for you, and this time we're going to be looking at the game. This is video 4 in our little series of how to play Warhammer Underworlds.
And we're going to be covering the sequences this time.
So Pete, what do you start with? You turned up, you're at Game Club, or over your dining room table, and your friend's there. What do you do?
Make a cup of tea.
Absolutely, yes.
After that, though, you're going to have to start getting your game set up ready to play. And the first thing you want to do is pick your warbands and your deck, but hopefully you've already done that.
We assume at the moment that you just have the core set. So you've got your deck because it comes ready built with a deck, and you've got your miniatures, and they may or may not be painted. It doesn't matter.
No. So the first thing you've got to do is work out where the boards go. Now, you get some boards in the box. There are other seasons boards as well. But to decide who's going to place the board first, you have to roll 4 of these dice.
If this is your first game, you've probably only got 2 boards, so you're going to have one each. And you might have to decide who's allowed to pick which one. But generally, people come with their own set, with their own boards, and you can pick any one from your collection of boards.
Yeah. Now, to determine who wins this kind of thing, you have to do what's called a roll-off. Each of you picks 4 dice. They can either be the defense dice, the black ones, or the white attacking dice, and you roll them. What you've got to do is try and get as many crits as possible.
Crits! That's the exclamation marks.
Crits! And basically, whoever gets the most crits gets to pick. If there are no crits between you, or you have the same number of crits, you then look at how many what are called single assists.
Yep, supports or half suns and suns, I've heard people call them.
Whatever you call them, that's this symbol here. Now, whoever has the most of those then wins. And if you've still not got any of those showing, you move on, or you have the same number, you then move on to double assists.
Yeah, which is like a 4. It should be an Agents
like
of Sigmar logo,
should
really,
be,
shouldn't it?
Yes. Now, some people call that the full moon, or whatever you want to call it as well, double assist, full assist. Yeah. You've got to see who has the most there. And again, if you've got none or you have the same number, maybe you've each rolled one of each, well, then you're going to have to roll again.
You have to roll again. There is no way out of it. There's no way so you just have to re-roll.
Now, the game normally says you roll 4 dice. Between you and your opponent, you can roll 5 or 6 or 7. It doesn't really matter as long as you roll the same number of dice.
That's a very good point. I'd never thought of that. But yeah, we always roll 4.
Yeah, because that's how the game works.
Yeah.
Once you've determined who the winner is, that person can decide to either set up a board first or second.
And it's quite significant. You might think, well, it doesn't really make much difference, does it? For a start, you can choose which side you put it, but you can do that anyway. But the order in which you pick the board is key, and can be key to winning or losing the game, believe it or not.
Yes. So in this example, let's assume that you've won the roll-off and you decide to place the board second. Your opponent then has to pick a board first. Now, that's their board. The side that they've picked and placed face up on the table is their board. You can't turn the board over. You can turn it round if you want to.
Yeah, and you won't be able to set miniatures up on their board. You'll be setting miniatures up on your board.
This is known as their territory.
Yes.
And then you have to pick your own board and place that face up on the table next to your opponent's. Once you've done that, you have to align them together. And there's lots of different ways of placing them. You can place them lengthways. You can place them straight on, as we call it. Or you can offset them up to 3 hexes, basically.
Yeah, I mean, when you first play, you'll probably be putting them straight on, sort of longest side against longest side. That's the easiest way to play. You'll find as you play the game more that there are reasons not to do that. If you're playing them with what they call long board, which is the 2 short edges next to each other, you have to place them so that they line up in a big straight line.
Yes.
You can't offset those. Offsetting the boards means that they don't line up properly. You do have to make whole hexes where you line them up, and as Pete said, there must be at least 3 whole hexes across the middle of the board. And there are definitely reasons to do that if you want to control territory or stop people from coming in quite so easily into your area.
And once you've done that, the next thing you have to do is to place the objectives. Now, you put 5 of those on the board.
5. How do we sort out who places what, Pete?
Well, it's handily linked to the initial roll we just made.
Aha.
And whoever has to pick their board first, so in this case your opponent, in our example, they get to place the first objective. Now you shuffle them up, you deal them face down so you don't know which numbers are there because it could be important, and then you take turns placing them and alternating, which means your opponent will place one, you'll then place one, and you continue that way. So in this situation, whoever picks the board first gets to place 3 objectives, and that could be very important.
It could be there's a lot of objective play with your objective hand. Remember the gold cards that are around control of these objectives, and so where they are can be really important. And so there are reasons to put them in a various number of places, but you'll have to decide, depending on what kind of deck you've built, what your plan for the game is, you'll have to decide where you want to put them.
Now, there are some rules on where you can place those objectives.
Okay, well, the first and I suppose in some ways most obvious thing, is so obvious probably even occur to you, is that the objective hex must go in a complete hex. It can't hang off the edge of the board.
Yeah. A lot of the hexes are half hexes around the board, and if they are half hexes, they're not included as a hex for purposes of the game. You can't put fighters on them and that kind of
No,
thing.
they're more just there for the aesthetic.
They are.
Yeah.
You can't put them on what are called the edge hexes, which are the completed hexes around the edge of the board, as the name suggests. Whoever places the subsequent objective tokens can't place them within 2 hexes of any other objective token. That's very important because it can mean that you run out of a lot of spaces to put things very quickly.
You do have to think about that because you also can't put them on starting hexes. So each board has 7 starting hexes on it, and they're the places that your fighters can start, which we'll cover in a moment. You may not put an objective hex on top of one of those, and between the 2 hex rule and the starting hex rule, you'll suddenly find your choices for putting objectives down might be restricted, or indeed you might be cunning and make it so that your opponent ends up putting an objective where he doesn't really want to because of how you've placed them. It's quite clever and surprisingly tactical.
Yep.
The final point to make is that whoever places the 5th and final hex, they can place one on an edge hex. And I don't mean the half hexes. I mean the ones that are just around the complete hexes that touch the edge of the board. You can, but only on the 5th turn.
Yes.
Place one there.
You also can't put objective tokens on blocked hexes or on lethal hexes.
Good point, Pete.
Both of those are very important things to remember. So you've got your objectives, you've got your boards set up now, you've got your rotation sorted out. You can also place what are called lethal hexes.
Lethal hexes.
Whoever places the first objective can then choose to place 1 lethal hex.
Yes, and they don't have to. That's a very key point because lethal hexes, as the name suggests, can be quite bad for your health.
Yeah.
And you may decide, actually, I don't want the risk of having these extra ones on there because they're only going to do me harm. But probably you're going to put one on because you can put one in your opponent's half and they can put one in your half, and your models are going to start in your half, so they're going to want to get one near you, and they're going to start in their half, and you're going to put one near them because it's basically a way of giving them extra possibilities to wound or restrict their movement. Because if you move through a lethal hex or finish a movement on a lethal hex, then your model fighter will take damage.
Yes. Now, one thing that isn't covered in the main rulebook, but is later on mentioned in a little update that GW have released, is you can't put that lethal hex near another lethal hex. You can't put it next to another lethal hex or a lethal token on the board that's already been placed.
Yes.
There must be at least 1 hex gap there.
Very important that.
So you've got your boards, you've got your objectives, which you've now turned over and revealed which ones are which numbers. You've got your lethal hexes as well. What's next, Robin?
Is it models, Pete?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay. What is it then?
You've got to draw your cards.
Draw cards, and we don't mean with a piece of paper and a pen.
No. So you have your decks that we discussed earlier. You have your objective deck, and you've got your gambit deck and your power cards all shuffled up into one big mass that you don't know where they are, all face down. You draw 3 of your objectives and 5 of your power cards.
You do. So you have 2 decks, and you draw from each, and you draw your 3 objective cards and your 5 power cards, and you look at them and go, "What idiot picked these?" You don't have to do that, but it does seem to happen.
We tend to do that a lot.
If you do get what we call a steaming pile, that's a technical term, then you can mulligan them. Mulligan is a word that I only learned through playing card games, and it basically means you can dispose of them. But there are rules for disposing of the cards. You can dispose your 3 objective cards or your 5 upgrade cards, but if you decide to get rid of your objectives, you must make the decision about your upgrades before you draw any new cards.
Yes, you can't get rid of your objective cards and then pick another 3 objective cards and go, well, actually, with the 5 power cards I've got, those objectives are all right. Yeah. You have to make your decision on whether you're going to get rid of either or both before you draw any new cards.
Or basically say, oh, these are still rubbish, I still don't want those, and then get rid of them. You can't do that. So it's a subtle point, but it is an important one. Yeah. And you do have to get rid of all of them. It's an all or nothing situation.
Yeah.
If you can't just go, actually, I read that card rubbish, I want to get rid of that one and just draw one. You can't. It's all or nothing.
Yeah.
As a general rule for beginners, if you've got 3 or more upgrades in your power deck, you probably want to get rid.
If you've got 4, you definitely want to get rid of. And 5, it's not a no-brainer.
No, because you can only use those if you've got glory.
Yeah.
And ploy cards. Gambits, ploys or spells are generally better early in the game for generating glory, and then you can start putting upgrades on fighters. But if you've got 5 upgrades, you can literally do nothing with them until you've scored some glory.
Yeah. So that's the cards picked. The next thing you've got to do is roll to see who places the fighters first, and this is another roll-off. You roll the same number of dice each, and whoever has the most crits or single assists or double assists wins, obviously in the order of importance. Number of crits first, then number of single assists, then number of double assists.
And assuming if you win that roll off, then you get to pick who places the first model.
Yeah. Now this is sort of important because whoever finishes putting all their models on the board first gets an extra bonus when determining who gets to go first.
Which is the next roll off you'll be doing if you've placed all your fighters down first. If not if you placed first, but if you finished placing your fighters first, then you will get an additional crit, which is often an automatic win.
So what you'll find is you'll have a certain number of models and your opponent won't have the same number. So you roll your dice, you determine who gets to place a model first. You then alternate placing models on the starting hexes. You place one, your opponent places one, you place one, and so on until everybody's placed their models.
If you've got more models than your opponent, they'll finish before you, which will give them a bonus later. But also, then you just once your opponent's run out of models, you just place all yours.
Yeah, you can, and that gives you a bit of freedom there. But we'll cover all of that in later videos about tactics, which we're still learning ourselves.
Well, we absolutely are.
So once you've placed all your models, you then have to have another roll off to see who gets to go first. Again, roll the same number of dice. Whoever has the most crits, whoever has the most singles, or whoever has the most doubles, depending on what you've rolled.
And this roll is the first one that really feels like it counts.
Yeah. And it is at this point where whoever finished setting up first gets +1 crit. So if your opponent doesn't roll any crits and you finish setting up first, you've already won without rolling a dice.
Well, not the game, just the roll off.
Sadly not.
Yeah. So your board's all set up and ready to play, and we'll cover how to do that in our next video in the How to Play Warhammer Underworlds series. Bye.